What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Here we are with another reaction. In this, we have Royal Bodyguard on Nights Out with Harry and William. Before we jump into this video, if you guys happen to enjoy, please don't forget to smash subscribe, give the video a thumbs up. Also, if you like support this channel by becoming a member, all you gotta do is hit that join button to receive your exclusive benefits. I'm kind of excited to jump into this. I guess we get to kind of hear Nights Out from the Bodyguard perspective. You don't really get to hear that. Let's do it.
You always knew that some people liked them and some people didn't. And that's kind of quite varied in so much as, the majority of places that we went, people were always very welcoming and glad to see them. But there was always somebody who may be an anti-monarchist at one level, all the way through to somebody who was maybe a fixated individual who wanted to do that member of the royal family harm.
Right in a minute.
In kind of like layman's terms, could you explain what the role of royal protection is?
Royalty protection, they're a Pacific department, and in my time, it was called SO14, Royalty Protection, Specialist Ops 14. And their role was to look after members of the royal family. And that department was split into three sections. There was the uniformed officers who were responsible for the physical security of the royal palaces. There was the protection officers who were responsible for the personal security of members of those royal families. So ultimately the bodyguards. And members of the special escort group formed the third strand of the department. They are the motorcycle outriders that escort not just the royal family, government ministers. They also have responsibility for high-value loads, Category A prisoners back and forth court. They have an escort role, and they're all part of royalty protection.
How many royal protection officers are working for the royal family, and is it a case that there's one assigned to each royal at any given time, or is there multiple depending on the day?
Good question.
Yeah, I mean, the model within royalty protection of how many officers deployed constantly changes. Yes, there are team members who are set aside to permanently work with that particular member of the family, and then other members like myself support those teams. With regards to numbers, there's always a minimum of one, and then after that we build it up accordingly. Now that is a foundation of threat and risk. That could be in relation to international events. It could be in relation to a local event. It could be based purely on the geography of where you're going and how many protection officers you feel you need to have a successful day. So
is it like one officer like just follows you around like all day, like even when you're in your home, or when you're in your home, they not really following you around, but as soon as you leave, hey, like I got to be with you at all times? And is it because you watch TV shows and you watch like royals or people high up in power, and they always got like some kind of security person watching out, and especially like teenagers, they're always getting annoyed, like and they try to ditch the person. But that's just TV shows. This is real life. So I wonder if like any of the royals ever tried to ditch them though, like ditch their personal security, their personal bodyguard. That'd be a funny story.
it's constantly a sliding process as to how many you get. But when I was in royalty protection, we had about 107 protection officers across the board, which when you compare that to the Secret Service at that time, which is about 4,500 strong, things done in a slightly different way.
Louise.
I know it probably changes
I
day
guess
to
when
day,
you think
but
about it,
could
the population of the U.S. is ridiculously bigger than the population of the U.K. And
give an insight into what a
more
day in the life of a
politicians and
royalty
everything.
protection officer might look like?
Yeah, I mean, a day in the life of a protection officer varied. If you were to follow a protection officer around for a month, you'd most probably find it extremely boring, because you spend a lot of time in meetings. You spend a lot of time on the planning table going through the what ifs. The last 12 months, we've seen 3 large state occasions, from the Queen's Platinum Jubilee through to the Queen's funeral and then the King's coronation. None of that was just thrown together. As people talk about Operation London Bridge has been in place since the 1960s.
Oh, wow.
Constantly
Since the
being
60s.
evaluated, constantly evolving. It's the similar mentality when you're planning a royal visit, whether that be an occasion whereby we're going to open or close something, or indeed on a much smaller scale, but still the same level of planning if this is a private visit. A protection officer's day is actually months worth of planning to get to that point. But sometimes as a protection officer, certainly working with younger members of the royal family, that's when you get to push your skills most probably to the boundaries, because a lot of that planning will go out the window. It's just not possible. We could be looking at a weekend in London, and certainly when Prince William and Harry were younger and in their informative years, very similar to lots of other people of that age, we would say, what's happening this weekend? Don't know yet. Okay. Any idea? No, waiting on a phone call, which, on a Friday and Saturday evening, a lot of other younger people are also in exactly the same position. We may be going to the cinema, we may be going to this restaurant, we may be going to this pub for a drink, I may be going to my friend's house. And then you get the phone call, no, I'm going out. Okay, where are you going? Don't know yet, but we need to head west. Chelsea, Fulham, yeah, let's go. And you're wandering out, not 100% knowing what you're doing, which, really puts up or rather, what you're doing as a protection team, you just don't know where you're going to.
Yeah, that is a very good point. I thought he was going to say, like I said earlier, like in their younger years, they try to ditch you. They try to find out a way to lose you. But no, it makes a really good point. As a teenager, you don't know your plans. Like you do things very spontaneously. I feel like as a teen and in my early 20s, like it was spontaneous. Like in college, it'd be like 4 or 5 in the afternoon. I'd be like, "What's the play for tonight? Like, what we up to tonight?" And we just figure out a plan on the spot. But so yeah, I can understand you getting to push your skills to the boundaries, to the limit, test how good you are, because you don't know what they're gonna do until they decide on the spot, and you got to figure it out from there. Basically, you got to improv.
You worked closely with the late Queen. What was she like?
Yeah, I mean, the Queen was great to work with. In and around the Queen's team, everything the Queen did pretty much run on rails. There was a big mechanism around the Queen to support those visits. And I can remember as a child, the Queen came to Swansea to open the leisure centre, which was, I think, around about 1977, 1978. And then many years later, the Queen went back to open the new Swansea Leisure Centre. And I was part of that protection team to actually take the Queen to open that leisure centre that I'd seen her open nearly 30 years before that. Things like that are great. That's what you remember as a protection officer. And you do see sides to all members of the royal family that aren't necessarily out in the public domain. For argument's sake, when the Prince of Wales, as he was then, the King, used to go to the military hospital in Birmingham to see the returning soldiers, who had, in some cases had life-changing, life-shortening injuries because of what we'd asked them to do in the war on terror. And the King would spend all day there. There was never any rush to leave, and he would talk to everybody. These young servicemen coming back, who had lost limbs. Very much a people person, which, from a protection perspective, brings its challenges, because he does want to go and speak to people. Thankfully, in my day, the modern phenomenon of the selfie didn't really exist. But now that is part and parcel of any royal engagement is the selfie. And you're putting a senior member of the royal family really close to someone. And also they don't want you in that picture either. So you've got to be in a position whereby you can react but similarly not spoil somebody's kind of once in a lifetime moment as well.
I
So
feel
you
that.
always knew that some people liked them and some people didn't, and that's kind of quite varied in so much as the majority of places that we went, people were always very welcoming and glad to see them. But there was always somebody who may be an anti-monarchist at one level, all the way through to somebody who was maybe a fixated individual who wanted to do that member of the royal family harm. Somebody who wishes to cause you embarrassment or cause you harm only has to ever get it right once. And certainly in the global 24-hour media that we now live in, that information, that incident happens immediately and is out there forever and a day. And that has massive consequences because everything that the UK stands for, to a certain extent, is on display.
And in your opinion, what is
feel
the
that.
greatest threat to the royal family?
I think the greatest threat is,
I feel like, yeah, it'd be difficult, kind of. I guess, yeah, with different everybody, each royal person, because they're just like us non-royals. They're gonna have different personalities. You're gonna have some that are more wanting to talk to everybody, wanting to meet the people, and those I assume are gonna be harder to protect just because they're out and about more. They're out in the public eye more, and there's more opportunity for anyone to hurt them. As where someone more reserved isn't gonna be just out talking to a lot of people that much. But shout out to the king, bro. Being willing to spend all day with those soldiers that are going to fight for the country that they're sending to wars to fight certain things, and they're losing limbs. They're coming back and they're traumatized. They're just not the same as when they left. For him to spend that time with these soldiers, it just means a lot. It means a lot. It shows them that what they're doing is appreciated.
is most probably difficult to kind of pinpoint because they're all threats, but they all have different connotations attached to them. The greatest threat ultimately is somebody who wishes to take their life. If you look at the threat with regards to the single cause issue, people who wish to use the world's media for an event to highlight their event, such as the anti-monarchist movement or indeed Just Stop Oil. With regards to actions of a demonstrator, they could be very similar to the actions of a terrorist carrying an IED in a rucksack. They jump across the barriers and they start to run towards the royal carriage. Okay, they're only going to unfold a banner, but at that pivotal moment, you don't know what they're going to do. And, the pressure on police officers to get that decision right, armed police officers to get that decision right, could have severe consequences. So, yeah, it is a constantly changing threat environment, and as the protection officer and as policing as a whole, you've got to make sure that you are up to that response.
I want to ask about the relationship between the royals and the paparazzi, especially after what happened to Diana. Mm-hmm. What were the paparazzi like, and what were your interactions like with them?
I mean, there's the press and there's the paparazzi, and the press are confined by a series of conventions that they've signed up to. So to a certain extent, the regulated press aren't your issue. They very much know what they can and can't do. But with regards to the paparazzi, they don't play by the same rules. It was always difficult because I fully understand, how much value there is from a paparazzi perspective to some of these photos that are taken. The sheer money that is involved, and kind of many years ago, and being with the Duke of Sussex and seeing the same guy take the same picture almost every week as we were coming out of a certain restaurant. I said, look, why are you taking the same picture? You must have hundreds of pictures of us. I doubt it's a fashion thing to critique the Duke's clothing on this particular night. Why are you taking the same photo over and over again? And the gentleman just simply replied back to me, this may be the last picture of him alive.
Oh
And that
wow.
to me is worth a lot of money.
Did you ever feel like
Mm.
any members?
I mean, that's a really valid point that he's making. That is an absolutely valid point. So that would be worth a lot of money. A lot of money had that happen.
The royal family were frustrated with constantly having to be
Oh, that's a good
protected and
question.
accompanied everywhere they went.
No, I don't think so. I think it's most probably because the royal family get cradle to grave protection. It's kind of what they know. Most probably the only different scenarios that those people that marry into the royal family. That is most
Oh,
probably a bit of an adjustment. But then you work as a team. You work all around that to make sure that they are comfortable with what they're getting. You kind of fully understand why you're there. You get that these people, your principals, want to have as much of a normal life as possible,
yeah.
and you have to facilitate that. The easiest thing in the world is just to say, "Well, stay in, don't go out." We've got big fences, we've got kind of policemen with guns on the outside.
Yeah.
Everything's fine, and we'll bring everything to you. That's not realistic.
Nobody
Senior
wants to
members of the
live
family
like
still
that.
want to kind of function. They still want to
Yeah.
go and see, other friends, other family members. They still want to go and do things outside of the official kind of capacity.
With
I feel
regards,
like nobody wants to live like a prisoner, even if it is a very cozy, comfortable prison where people will everything that you want, they will go and get it for you. I mean, you don't want to be stuck in a house like me and my wife. When we were sick, like this past week, we were just like it was just being stuck in this place was. And of course, this is no palace or anything like that, and we ain't got people who gonna just bring us whatever we want. But I don't know, just being stuck in the apartment, just it felt like terrible. It was like we got to get out of here. And so once we started going towards the end of the sickness, we just got out, went to a park, and walked around, and it felt literally amazing. Just because we had been stuck in the house sick for like 3 or 4 days, and once we just got out, got some fresh air, got to walk around, it was such a great just feeling. So I can understand why you want to be stuck inside their whole life.
to Harry and Meghan, obviously they stepped back as serving royals. Did you ever see that coming from Harry?
Um, in all honesty, no. But then, the latter part of the years, the involvement and his relationship and marriage to the Duchess of Sussex, I wasn't involved in that. So, I kind of knew him when he was a young prince.
Okay.
And no, I kind of couldn't see that. I thought he was very, very committed to the family, very extremely committed to his military career. They're the only ones that can evaluate that decision to kind of step away from the royal family. I mean, I think if you look at the purely my side of things, the protection side of things, then, they've stepped away from that, away from having royalty protection that certainly from the Duke's perspective, he's had since he was born. It's an extremely emotive issue on all sides. You're not just that of the Sussexes. It's an emotive issue of the Metropolitan Police Service, who are ultimately the deliverers of that protection, and from the taxpayers' side of things, who's going to pay for it? But then the flip side of that is, you are talking about the king's son. You are talking about the future king's brother. He is a military veteran, having served 2 tours of Afghanistan. There is a duty of care issue attached to that as well, based on threat and risk. But, there are other members of the royal family who no longer have police protection and indeed have private protection. So, it's not the first time, but certainly, it was their decision and they're the only ones that can evaluate whether that was a positive or negative move.
I
Do you
feel
think
that.
they're a close family?
Again, from my experience, yes, as a family, their family life is under the microscope. It's drawn out in the public
Yeah.
kind of gaze. There's always interaction. When you look at summer court in Balmoral, Christmas court in Sandringham, all the family kind of are there. They all interact kind of with each other. But as with all families, they have their kind of disagreements and they have their time that they want to maybe spend away from each other.
In the
I
event,
feel like 100% that makes sense. Yeah, stepping away from, I guess, serving as roles, to me, I get it. I understand it. It's just a lot of expectations and responsibilities and so much that I feel like would make you want to step away, especially from someone like he said earlier, not that didn't grow up like that, that married into it, and it's just too much. It's just, and so stepping away from it completely makes sense to me. But yeah, I guess, and as a royal family, it's cool that they're just basically a normal family, right? They're close, they get together for these functions and everything, but they still have their fights, their arguments, their disagreements. It's just, I guess, the only difference is everything they do is put under a microscope. Uh, that would suck.
event of a hypothetical attack, as a protection officer, are you expected to put your life in front of the royals?
Yes, there is the Hollywood view of, kind of standing in the way, taking the bullet.
Yeah.
But, really, you should see lots of these things before they kind of happen. That's why you've been trained to that level. That's why you're there. Okay, I'm not naive enough to say that you're going to, stop it every single time, because something could take your attention away and you could miss that. But ultimately, I suppose there is a consideration that that's what you may have to do to provide kind of effective body cover. I mean, if you're looking at, were there ever that kind of life-threatening moment, then no, I never had one. Far more life-threatening moments on the firearms team and on the TSG. So, I never had, some of the critical incidents that we've had, as royalty protection as a department, with the Princess Royal being attempted kidnap on the Mall, Marcus Sargent shooting at the Queen, trooping the colour, the Prince of Wales as he was then in Australia. I never had any of those moments, thankfully. You have long days, and sometimes, those long days, certainly when you're doing things like Wales Week or Scotland Week, it's constant, and you're rolling into it. Your royal walkabout is your critical time, and the first time I ever did that was down in Brighton with the late Queen and the late Duke of Edinburgh, and they went down there for the day, and I got back in the car having only done a 15-minute walkabout, and I was just physically and mentally drained.
Oh,
The protection officer I was with just looked at me, and said, "It'll get better as time goes on." But,
it'll get better.
fortunately for me, I never had a critical situation. But a lot of that is because of the planning that goes into your event,
Yeah.
the support that you get given by other stakeholders and other police officers as well for your event.
How long in total
I
did you?
just said it'll get better. That feel like just at any job, bro. That first day and you just wiped out. It's like you got that coworker who's been there for a while. It'll get easier once you get things down. You'll kind of figure out how to do it without burning up so much energy, without being so exhausted. So that's kind of how it was. It seems like it'll get better. Don't worry. But it's kind of cool. I feel like with anything, when I react to videos about the military, react to this video, just a lot of things. It's all about just the plan, the amount of detail that goes into the planning for any and every possibilities is incredible.
Did you work as a royal protection officer, and why did you make the decision to leave?
So I was a protection officer from 2007 to 2013.
Dang,
And then
6 years.
I made the decision to leave Metropolitan Police Service and have a look at what the private sector would be like for someone with my skill set.
It pays the
And that's
rent.
when I set up Trojan Consultancy. Now we're a team of former police officers. I'm very fortunate that everybody on the team are people that I worked with, trained, or both. So that's really good. I know everybody's skill set, but I also know everybody's personality as well. It's different, whilst the work is the same. Okay, there's some things you haven't got. We haven't got the badges and the guns anymore, but we've got the vast experience. You get to meet some nice people. You get to work for some nice people. You get to go into nice environments. Okay, you can't get completely absorbed by it. You can't get
Yeah,
red carpet fever, as we used to call it, and
I feel that.
think that actually the principal's life is your life. You're there to support them in exactly the same way as the PA, as the chef, as the gardener. So you firmly got to have an understanding of your position. And again, I think, with Trojan Consultancy, we have that understanding because we've spent so many years working with senior members of the royal family, prime ministers, senior government ministers, people coming into the UK who require kind of protection. And whilst you might be going to the theatre this evening and then going to a 5-star Michelin restaurant, and then you'd drive home in the Bentley and put your principal back into their £30 million house. You then go home and finish because you've handed over to another team to take on the rest of it. You're back at the school gate tomorrow morning, dropping your children off, talking to the other dads, and the next meal you have is a Nando's.
That was a pretty cool interview. I feel like
particular occasion went into Prince.
I feel like we got to learn a pretty good amount about what it's like to be a royal bodyguard, and I'm sure that private sector pay you just a little bit more. Y'all talk to me in the comment section. What did you think about the video? If you enjoyed, don't forget to subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, check out the next one.